Hi, my name is Ubaid, and I'm here to give you a quick overview of the new changes in Botmock. First thing you will notice is that we have changed and optimized some of the array's menu options around in your editing experience. In the top right corner, you will see some of the familiar buttons and options. So you'll be able to invite your team members, see all the comments in the document, be able to see the snapshots and take a snapshot, settings, downloading this as PDF and PNG, and saving the changes. Over on the left side, you will see some of the new menu options that were not there before. First up is the journeys. We have now renamed previews to be called journeys. They work exactly the same way as previews do. So if you're familiar with how to create previews, run them, download them as videos, um, you will feel right at home. But we just renamed them to journeys now. The second thing is the ability for you to test your entire conversation flow. Journeys allow you to actually create a particular flow, extract a particular path for your customers, whereas test allows you to do step-by-step walk through your flow without having to do predetermined paths. And that's really great for you to test out once you've defined your intents, variables, and entities. Let's talk about intents. Intents, simply put, are defined as user's intentions. What is the user trying to do? So the user says, show me yesterday's financial news. The user intent is to retrieve a list of financial headlines, and the intents can be given a name, such as verb or a noun, such as show news, or list objects, or create object, or detect object. And each of the intents have a bunch of training phrases around it. Training phrases, simply put, are the ways to define utterances. These utterances help us and your design engineers to figure out what is the user trying to say. The user can say it exactly the same way or in some permutation of these different phrases. The more phrases you have, the better your testing would be. We highly suggest you spend some time thinking about what your user replies are going to look like by thinking about them in utterances format. Next up is the ability for you to define variables. Variables let you store values of some entities or some sort of conditions and that a bot can use at a later stage. Variables can be used in your content. Let's talk about entities. Entities essentially modify your intent. They add more details to your intent. So the user says, show me yesterday's financial news. We can determine that the entities yesterday and financial news represent certain values like date and what type of news it is. So for example, we have created a entity type here called news type. And for each entity, we're able to give it some values that represent what this entity would be. And then some synonyms that allows us to understand what other ways can a user say this, and they're part of the entities. Once you've defined your intents, variables, and entities, you're then able to run your test. But before we can do that, I'm going to show you how to use those intents within your design. So if you're familiar from previously, when you click on a particular connection, we asked you, what is the action that the user must take to go from point A to B? This action is now labeled as intent. We still have action labels. These labels for every single connection allows you to keep that readability aspect of it. So if you're showing this flow to somebody else, they can get more detailed. They don't read detect object as the label, but they can say something like, you know, save object, or they can have determine object and color, right? So you can be more descriptive about it. And your intent is what lets our NLP engines and any other NLP engine, for example, to be able to determine what needs to happen for them to go from point A to B. The other thing we can do now is to add some conditions that add more check and balance to if the intent plus these conditions meet, then go to the next message. And you can route smartly, right? So each of your connections can be based on, hey, if the user says red square, then go to this message, unless if they say blue square, go to this message. And they're really easy to add. So you can add a variable and say, hey, if this variable is red, then this particular thing will be true. But you can have another connection that now will say something like the intent is detect object, And the rule is the object color is not red, right? And that really gives you a nice way of determining the routing part. You will notice that as soon as I attach an intent, there is a bubble with three dots in it. That represents there is an intent attached to this particular connection. Connections where you just want to route to the next message with no user input, you don't attach an intent part. When you go to a testing thing, it's a little different than journeys. Journeys are predetermined path that the user takes that you have decided on, whereas testing allows you as a user to navigate yourself. So for example, I can start answering the questions or responding to my bot, and we'll see how it behaves. So you will remember that we have created a bunch of intents. One of them is to understand if I say create object, right? So as soon as I say that, it actually figures out which next message to go at. And this is a really powerful way for you to actually figure out what you're building. Is it the right way of doing things or not? You're now able to zoom in and out with just using your mouse wheel. Notice there's no pan button anymore. So your pan is always enabled. The other thing you can do now is you can hold the shift key and you can select multiple of these. When you do multiple selections, you will see the familiar icons show up at the bottom right corner. You can clone these nodes or you can delete these nodes.